In the spring of 1721, a Spanish merchant in Philadelphia finished a transaction and handed over a coin. Not an American coin. There was no American coin. The coin had been minted in Mexico City, stamped with a royal seal that had nothing to do with America, and shipped across an ocean to a continent Spain did not own. And yet every merchant in Philadelphia knew its weight, trusted its value, and accepted it without question. It was called the Piece of Eight, and it was running the American economy long before America had an economy to run. When the Founding Fathers sat down to build this country, they wrote a constitution, formed a Congress, and elected a president. But the money in their pockets still belonged to someone else. So they handed the problem to one man. What that man did next is the reason you carry a dollar today. But what he did was not what they told you he did. The word on that coin, the weight of that coin, even the symbol the world now puts in front of every dollar amount. None of it started here. And the decision made on April 2nd, 1792, did not create something new. It made something borrowed look like something owned. This is not just a story about a law, a mint, or a founding father solving a financial problem. This is a story about how a nation built its most recognized symbol from three pieces it quietly took from three different places, and how the story told afterward left all three sources out. To understand what Hamilton actually built in 1792, you have to go back to a valley in Bohemia in 1518. A silver mine opened in a town called Joachimsthal. The mine produced more silver than the region had seen in years, and the local count began minting coins from it. Large, heavy, consistent. Reliable enough that merchants trusted them across borders. People called them Joachimsthalers. Too long to say in a hurry. Merchants shortened it to thalers, then dalers. The coin moved into Dutch trade networks, crossed the Atlantic on merchant ships, and arrived in the American colonies with a name that had already been worn smooth by 2 centuries of use. Dollar, a word from a Bohemian valley, carried by Dutch traders, already old when the first American colony was founded. The name was never American, but the coin that gave it economic weight was Spanish. In 1497, Spain authorized a large silver coin called the Real de a Ocho, the Piece of Eight. It was minted in colonial facilities across Spanish America, primarily in Mexico City and in Potosi, Bolivia, from silver pulled out of mountain mines in volumes that flooded trade routes across multiple continents. The coin was heavy, consistent, and accepted in markets from Asia to Europe to the Caribbean. In the American colonies, it became something more specific than popular. It became necessary. Britain never sent enough of its own coinage to meet the daily demand of colonial commerce. What filled the gap was Spanish silver. A farmer in Virginia settling accounts reached for pieces of 8. A merchant in Boston clearing a debt counted out Spanish coins. A dock worker in New York received Spanish silver as wages and spent it the same afternoon in markets that accepted nothing else as reliably. The 13 colonies ran on a coin stamped with the face of a Spanish king. When they broke from Britain in 1776, they kept the problem. The Continental Congress issued paper notes during the war to fund the military. Soldiers carried them home. Merchants looked at them and shook their heads. Within a few years, the phrase, "not worth a continental," was common speech across the new country. It meant worthless. It meant paper printed by a government that could not back it. A soldier who had fought the war came home with a wallet full of paper that a market vendor would not accept for bread. The country had independence. It did not have money people trusted. George Washington knew it, Congress knew it, and in 1789, they gave the problem to Alexander Hamilton. If this is the first time you are hearing how completely the early American economy ran on Spanish coins, you are not alone. Most people who know this story start it in 1792 with a law being signed. They never go back to see what made that law necessary or what Hamilton actually did to write it. That is the part this video exists to show. Drop a comment and tell us. Did you know American commerce ran on Spanish silver for over a century before the dollar existed? We read every comment. We always reply. Now back to Hamilton, because what he did in January 1791 is where this story turns. Hamilton was 34 years old when Washington appointed him the first Secretary of the Treasury. He spent 2 years on the problem before he submitted his recommendation to Congress. He examined the coins already moving through American markets. He studied how Britain, France, and Spain structured their monetary systems. He interviewed merchants about what they trusted and why. In January 1791, he submitted his report on the establishment of a mint. His recommendation was precise. The new American dollar would be a silver coin. It would contain 371.25 grains of silver. That number did not come from a calculation built around American resources or American standards. Hamilton had taken Spanish pieces of 8, placed them on a scale, and measured their actual silver content. Then he proposed matching that weight exactly, not approximately, exactly. Because the piece of 8 was the coin American merchants already trusted, and Hamilton understood something that no proclamation could change. You cannot order people to trust a new currency. Trust moves through familiarity. The fastest way to make the dollar credible was to make it weigh the same as the coin everyone already accepted. So he copied the weight, gave it an American name, and sent the recommendation to Congress. Congress approved it. On April 2, 1792, Washington signed the Coinage Act into law. The United States Mint opened in Philadelphia. The first federal building constructed under the new Constitution was built specifically to produce a coin modeled on another nation's silver. And the Spanish piece of 8 did not retire. It remained legal tender inside the United States for 65 more years, until 1857. An American merchant could accept a Spanish coin as payment, and no law required him to refuse it. Both coins circulated. Both were trusted. One was called national currency. One was called foreign. They weighed the same, but Hamilton borrowed more than the weight. Consider what the dollar is built from. The word dollar came from a Bohemian valley through Dutch trade routes. That part most people have never heard. The silver standard came from a Spanish coin Hamilton placed on a scale in 1791. That part is documented in his own report. And the symbol, the single mark that precedes every dollar amount on earth, printed on every receipt, typed before every price, recognized faster than almost any other mark in global commerce. That, too, did not originate in America. In the 1770s, merchants and financial agents handling Spanish peso transactions were writing shorthand in correspondence. The Spanish peso was abbreviated Ps. Over years of fast handwriting, the P and the S began to overlap. The vertical stroke of the P moved through the curve of the S. What remained was an S crossed by a line. The earliest documented use of that symbol appears in a letter dated 1778, written by Oliver Pollock, a New Orleans merchant who financed portions of the American Revolution. He was writing a shorthand abbreviation for Spanish pesos, not American dollars. Spanish pesos. The symbol the entire world now reads as American money was first written by a man abbreviating a foreign currency. When Washington signed the Coinage Act on April 2, 1792, all 3 foundations were already in place. A name from Bohemia that had been traveling 2 centuries. A silver weight copied from Spain and recorded in a treasury report. A symbol written as shorthand for a foreign coin by a man in New Orleans. None of it was original. All of it became the dollar. The first coins, struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1792, were copper test pieces. Pattern coins, struck to verify the machinery before silver was committed to full production. Washington contributed silver to the mint's early operations. Records from the period indicate the silver came from his household, from his table. Some accounts point to Martha Washington's silverware being among the material melted down for the first experimental pieces. The President of the United States was sending his household silver to be melted into coins whose design had been traced from a Spanish original. The piece of 8 kept circulating. 1800, 1820, 1840. American coins and Spanish coins moved through the same markets, the same cash boxes, the same hands, completing the same transactions. Merchants recorded both. Banks held both. Congress finally closed it in 1857. The Coinage Act of that year ended the legal status of foreign coins in American commerce. The Piece of Eight was officially retired 65 years after the dollar that had been built to replace it was born. The United States dollar was not invented, it was assembled. A name from a Bohemian mining town, a weight measured off a Spanish coin, a symbol written in shorthand for a foreign currency. Hamilton brought these three pieces together not because he was deceiving anyone, but because trust cannot be created from scratch. It has to be transferred from something people already believe in. He understood that, acted on it, and built a currency that worked. What came after was a story that kept the dollar and quietly removed everything it had been built from. The name became American. The weight became American. The symbol became American. The sources became footnotes. And footnotes, over enough time, become invisible. The dollar's name is American. Its bones are not. If you want more stories told this way, the documented version, with the parts that were left out, subscribe and turn on notifications.